You were sharing pictures from the protests yesterday. You noticed out there on the march routes, people holding up your magazine cover, which must have been an unusual sight. We think we can show an example of one of the posters that was out there in the crowds. What city was that in, and what did it mean to you to see your story being held up like that?
Yeah, Brian, I mean, that particular image that you just shared, that was from the Bay Area March. People were sending me photos from the Upper West Side, from Dallas. I have to say, I was covering the march yesterday. I actually didn't see them myself. They were sent to me by other people, but it was interesting to see, a story kind of resonate, and people hold up that image as a symbol of what's happening here.
What's the most important takeaway from your cover story? We had women's marches 1 year ago this weekend, and now a second round this weekend.
I think the most important takeaway is that the march is just the tip of the iceberg, or the crest of the wave, essentially. All of these women are, it's not like they're just marching and then going home and doing nothing. They are marching and then they're running, or if they're not running, they're organizing. And if they're not organizing, they're getting everyone they know to vote. The Women's March today, actually, the official Women's March organization is launching a new voter registration program called Power to the Polls, and their goal is to get 1 million people registered to vote before the midterms. So, this is not this is a cultural moment, but it's also a political, it's like a political revolution. That's what these activists are trying to achieve here.
So, Douglas Brinkley, what's the bigger story this weekend? The shutdown in D.C. or these marches in other cities?
I think they're both large, but of course the shutdown's quite dominant. If you can't have the federal government running this week, we're in deep trouble. Nobody knows how long the shutdown's going to be. Everybody's entrenched and dug in. I mean, you can foresee if the shutdown lasts this entire week, it might start affecting the world marketplace. Stock market is going to be in question, and not to mention, lives being risked, lives on the line in the military, or due to health benefits not being serviced properly, etc. So we're in the middle of the Trump shutdown here is a gigantic story, but I think it works nicely with the women's movement, because just like at Trump's inauguration, the counter split screen was of the Women's March. Now with the shutdown, yet again, the women are showing it wasn't a one-trick pony. They are in organization resistance mode.
Yeah, I really am struck by the size of these protests.
Yeah.
Maybe I had low expectations myself, thinking it wasn't going to be that big a deal on the one-year anniversary. The pictures, though, told the story in a strong way. Jeff Greenfield, there's always this debate about how to cover protests, how much attention to give. The March for Life was in Washington the other day. Some conservatives feel it didn't get enough attention. Some liberals feel the Tea Party got more attention than these women's marches are getting. Where do you come down on this?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that if you are committed to one side of a political argument, you are always going to feel that there are more of you and that the media have not given you props. My own feeling is that the fact that the second year saw this kind of turnout clearly merits major press attention. But I think, as Doug pointed out, the consequence of a government shutdown is so monumental in political terms. It demonstrates so clearly how the norms have just disappeared that I think it would be just wrong to say, well, we really got to focus more on one or the other. Actually, I was thinking of the old story about the Jewish mother gives her son a red shirt and a blue shirt, and he wears the red shirt, and the mother says, what, you didn't like the other one? I mean, there's only, even in a 24-hour cable news universe, there's only so much time, and you've got two major stories. And as far as I'm concerned, they're both being covered the correct way, which is they are both very big deals. And lastly, they both demonstrate one of the things that the year of Trump has brought to us, which is this enormous increase in intensity. The political feelings on both sides run so deep and so powerfully that they bring millions into the street and they bring the government to a halt.
It's the Great Divide, and the Great Divide is visible this weekend on our TV screens in a way that it rarely becomes so visible, so obvious. Charlotte, back to you on this topic of Washington versus outside Washington. I think there's so much attention around all things Trump. Is it your feeling as a beat reporter covering this protest movement that some of these first-time female candidates feel like they don't get enough media oxygen?
I mean, Brian, I think these are essentially two sides of the same story. One way to look at this is that Trump's struggles to legislate, from the health care bill to the JFK protests that led to the first injunction against the travel ban, Trump's struggles are victories for this resistance movement that is largely led by women. So every time, many of Trump's political obstacles are his own. He's in some ways his own worst enemy with some of his tweets and other things that are kind of self-inflicted wounds. But some of his biggest legislative struggles are actually victories for this well-organized movement that has been organizing against him for this entire year. And I would actually lump the shutdown in with that, because one of the reasons that it's been so hard to get a compromise about immigration is that this left-wing protest movement is insisting on a clean DREAM Act. They do not want Democrats to compromise on immigration, and I think there's an argument to be made that we might have seen a compromise by now if there were not all of these activists who were flooding the phone lines insisting that Schumer not sell out the Dreamers.
And this entire year, looking ahead between now and November, it's all about the intersection of this debate in Washington and the Me Too movement and the women's marches. It's about the intersection of those two stories.